Welcome to Godsplaining, Contemplative Preachers, Contemporary Age. Each week, join the Dominican friars as they consider all things Catholic.
Welcome to Godsplaining. I am Father Gregory Pine. Oh, gosh, I can't even say my own last
Optimus
name.
Prime. Yes.
Awesome.
New episode topic change.
Yeah, exactly.
Transformers.
I had the Optimus Prime Transformer growing up.
Yeah.
And it had the.
That was so great.
So for those of you who don't know, Optimus Prime was a machine. You know, so he was like a, what would you call him? Like a semi? Yeah, it was like a semi truck that turned into like a battling robot machine, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the back of the semi folded out into his little like laboratory. And at the front of the semi hitch, there was this little thing, and you could push different buttons, and it would say different things.
Oh.
And there was one button that said, "I'm Optimus Prime." But I used to go around my house just pushing that button repeatedly, not even letting it finish. So it'd be like, "I'm up, I'm up."
Yeah.
And then eventually, my dad took it and lost it, and then he didn't rediscover it for like 7 years.
Wow. Wow. When you were 28.
Yeah, exactly. Heartbreak. So I'm Father Gregory Pine, P-I-N-E, not Prime. And then this is Father Bonaventure. At this point, when we've posted this episode, you've completed your semester. So
this is live. Is that true? Well,
I think so, yeah.
It's going so fine.
No, it's not that long. Yeah.
No, it's not long. No, this is my last year in PhD studies in classes. So I'm excited, I hope, God willing, Deo Volente, that this will be the last year I ever take exams, and I'll just have to give them from now on, which is different.
What if you become an actuary?
Ooh.
More exams
to come. Well, you got to do what you got to do.
Chances are low, though.
Yeah, so I'm happy about that, and I have a lot of comprehensive exams. So reading through the whole canon of Western philosophy and others, it'll be fun. And then learning French as a language to read but not speak. Nice. So it's like a code, and it's a fun thing because I always discover. I know how to read French now. I can translate things, but when I listen to French people speak, I have no idea what they're talking about. It's a different language.
Yeah.
But you always discover things like, who would have thought "we" was O-U-I? That doesn't make any sense.
It's crazy.
It should be W-E.
Yeah.
You know?
I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's delights and excitements in that. But I'm not going to. I was thinking I should figure out how things actually sound. But since the exam's so close, I've learned what I call Bonaventure French. So that has its own pronunciation, and that's how I read. So I don't want to learn real French.
Mess with that,
yeah, because
throw you off.
It's much worse. Yeah.
Yeah.
Il there
right,
is. Yeah.
Yeah, in Switzerland, I'll see if I can deploy some Bonaventure French.
It's actually, it'll offend everyone. It probably sounds like German.
Got it.
That's my suspicion. German and Latin combined. But that's good to go. And it's tumultuous times, I suppose, too, which is nice. It's America. It's the fall. It's an even year.
Yeah.
So,
I think actually by the time we've posted this episode,
it's live.
The election it's already taken place.
Wow. Yeah. Congratulations, Donald Trump. I mean, Joe Biden. I mean, actually, who knows?
It's true.
Everything is possible.
Everything is possible, if you believe. There's a wise poet who once said that.
Everything is permitted without God, but everything is possible today, apparently.
There it is. Father Bonaventure quoting Dostoevsky. It's like Michael Scott quoting Wayne Gretzky.
Did he quote Wayne Gretzky?
You miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Wow. It's excellent. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about politics. So a couple of weeks back, we had an episode on voting in anticipation of the election itself.
What'd you say?
Like an apology for why one ought to vote. Because I think like a lot of folks, well, maybe it's not a lot of folks, but I suspect some folks don't think that their vote really matters too terribly much.
Every vote matters.
There you go. So we were
might not be counted, but it matters.
Bingo. So we were talking about, kind of contribution to the common good by means of the very thing that is, kind of appointed for our contribution. So in this, we're going to kind of zoom out now that we're into a new political regime or the continuation of a political regime. Again, we have no idea what's about to happen because this is live.
No one knows.
We're going to talk about politics and what politics entails or what politics is for, just kind of in a more basic sense. What do we mean by politics? Yeah, because I think, I suppose many people's first impression of politics is negative, or at least it has come to be negative. So what would you say, like man in the street type thing? What are we talking here?
I think politics and cynicism are like the same thing today. Unfortunately, right? Everyone thinks that if you raise politics, it used to be like a discourse like religion, where it was the politics of religion you weren't allowed to mention at Thanksgiving, or they were always mentioned Thanksgiving. You weren't allowed to bring up on first dates because they're kind of controversial. But for like, because they dealt with substantive issues that people could disagree about and not know how to, because people aren't rational all the time, know how to have good conversations with each other about this. They got offended when someone said you're wrong. That sort of thing. Like, this is crazy. Okay. Yeah. But now it seems like you don't bring up politics because someone could kill you.
Okay.
I mean, or you could be hit, or you could be whatever. I mean, or just it's so frustrating because it's a realm of pure cynicism.
Sure.
I mean, when you think of, I think most people, when they think of politics, they think of a person standing in front of a camera who's on either side of the House of Congress or in the Senate or something, and they're just saying something. And you think, what are they saying that for? What's the angle? It's really disheartening and depressing. Or when the president speaks, and you think, and this could apply to anyone who's president right now, and says something, you say, what does he really want? What's the angle? Politics now, I think, is this like cynical. Oh, it makes me feel uncomfortable. Yeah, I don't like it.
It's like watching the news or watching political discourse more broadly with people of different generations.
Yes.
So I think our generation, when somebody makes a campaign promise, I will not say a concrete proposal. Like somebody says, like, we're going to put somebody on the moon. My first reaction is to go, it's just like, really? Come on, you're not serious. But I think there's still a kind of like maybe latent trust among members of different generations.
That's true.
Regarding political promises or regarding like the deliverances of the news media, for instance, where I think the kind of general tendency over the past 25 years has really been hollowing out the trust or the credit, like kind of like credulousness of the populace.
Yes.
So as a result of which, I think you're right in that a lot of political discourse right now is underwritten by deep cynicism, and that you get the impression that the people saying the things don't even believe the things that they're saying.
Yeah, and everything becomes political, and unfortunately, that in a sense is true, but not in the way that it should be. I mean, this is why it's so frustrating. I think I don't know if you get this same feeling, but politics is actually like a legitimate discipline of study. Mm-hmm. It's actually a noble way of life.
Yeah.
I mean, the way now we're wearing medieval costumes, but like the classical tradition, or anyone who's trained up in, even 100 years ago or 50 years ago in the Western canon. I mean, a statesman and a politician is, in Nicomachean Ethics, in Aristotle's book about ethics, like until book 10, that's the best life, and then all of a sudden, like the contemplative shows up or something. We haven't seen him for 9 books, but the statesman, the person who orders the political life, is the most important way of life. Another example, early Greeks, one of the best things you could do, the most important thing to do, is found a city. Mm-hmm. So like Xenophon's Anabasis, when he's marching back to the sea, his troops are always worried. He's got 10,000 men with him. They're always worried that he's going to stop and just found a city with them. And because that's what great men, and they know Xenophon is great. He's their captain.
Yeah.
And they know great men desire to found cities because that's where greatness is found. So, and not in a sort of cynical power, like he wanted to get power, but because if you're worthy of greatness, then you should take on great projects. And the greatest project is to organize the polis, the political sphere, how human beings get along.
Yeah.
No,
I think that like there is a sense in which, so when we hear politics, we think about it as the current praxis of taking polls and kind of making strategic arrangements, strategery, lockbox, etc. But when politics more broadly conceived, or within the classical tradition, is the kind of crowning discipline of ethics. So it's like corporate ethics, right? So Aristotle observes that man is a political animal. St. Thomas Aquinas adds, social animal, but political animal. And when we hear that, we think, he's conniving, he's mischievous, he's manipulative. But no, that for him is descriptive. Mm-hmm. It's just that some of our ends are only ever realized in corporate disciplines or in corporate enterprises. So we are meant for life in the city, because he says the man who lives apart is either a beast or a god, right? But to be a man is to really be engaged in praxis. It's to exercise one's practical reason and to comport oneself in an active life so that he can, be perfected in matters of agriculture or animal husbandry, or whatever other like artisanal arts and stuff like that,
Yeah.
like conceived in this like kind of 3rd, 4th century BC notion, but like so that they ultimately there can be a kind of corporate wealth and then a corporate tranquility of order within the polis, so that people can like think about God and go from there.
Yeah, you can transcend. I mean, Aristotle talks about you develop. It starts the family as like the first level or something individual. Then there's the family, and the family is able to achieve reproduction and all of this. You're able to carry on human life when you have a family unit. And then there's villages he has, and that's like basic needs. You have to have a blacksmith. Not everyone can be a blacksmith, but it's the city that actually everyone is striving for. So it's actually the primary end of the human being in a sense. It's even though it comes later than individuals do, it is actually what we're striving to, because in the city, he says, in the village, he says you can live, but in the city you live well, and a life well lived is the aim of life. We're not just supposed to survive and get our food and sustenance, but actually we're supposed to develop culture. In a sense, in the city you can transcend the merely natural and biological, and that's why the political is this realm, this space for transcending, and politics, or the polis, the city is his version of this. You could say the state. It's kind of a bad translation, but the regime, the unity, the community, you could say, the polity is the republic. Is actually the highest entity. It has its own unity. It has its own descriptors, and the politician is supposed to be dealing with that, taking, caring, tending, feeding the polis, the polity, the republic, so that everyone can live lives well. So it's such a noble thing, but different view of it.
Yeah, and I think that like there, the kind of primacy is accorded to the good, right? So when St. Thomas builds up his understanding of the natural law, he says that there are certain goods with which human beings engage, which just are constitutive. It's just like without these things, life would not be livable or worth living. So on account of the fact that you're a substance, you want to preserve your existence. He said this is a kind of very basic thing. On account of the fact that you're an animal, you want to procreate and educate your children. So you think about those two things as preserving your individual life and then handing on your species' life. But then he says, by virtue of the fact that we're rational animals, we want to know the truth about God. We want to live in society. We want to shun ignorance. We want to avoid offending those with whom we live. And so there are certain goods, highest goods, which can only ever be realized in political discourse, effectively, like in the life of the polity. And so the city is the setting for which man attains to his heights, the kind of full grandeur of his natural and, we can go on to say supernatural vocation. But in order to kind of gain purchase on that, we're going to take a look at different fundamental understandings of political forms of life. But before we do that, we're going to take a break.
This is Godsplaining. Get up to date on all our latest episodes at opeast.org/Godsplaining.
And we are back. We are at Godsplaining. Man, I am just slaying these introductions. I'm Optimus Prime.
Prepositions are tough.
And this is an episode of Transformers. So thanks so much for joining us. Exactly, for joining us on our robot special. We're talking about politics, life in the polis. But here, on the one hand, we can just tell you that there are better ways of understanding politics in ancient and medieval forms, but it doesn't really cash out if it has, no purchase on the present. So let's talk about the different principal ways in which people understand the political regime now in these days, and like how those are kind of at work. So you've got basically like political liberalism, and you've got Republican politics, and that's not just to say you've got like Republicans and Democrats. It's a different thing. It's a different way of conceiving of political discourse in which both parties may or may not participate. So first, I think politics.
I mean, liberal politics is, in some ways, we're so downstream of this. It's the air we breathe that it's to even explain it. You're like, well, of course, that just is politics. An important part with any analysis, so they just realize the thing you thought was actually X is just one conception of X, and it might not even be the best conception of X. So liberal democracy, liberal politics, and that's a small L, by the way. So this is all small L, and then we'll talk about Republican and small R. These are just ways of understanding the organism, you could say, of politics, the discipline. And with liberal politics, the emphasis is on the individual. We're coming from John Locke, we're coming from Thomas Hobbes, Bacon, we're doing the moderns, you could say. And there's this Adam Smith even, Rousseau, this idea that the fundamental core unit is the individual, and of course, what else are there, right? It's the human version of atomism. There's a reductionism here, of course. I'm sorry, I moved to critique too immediately. Anyway, it's just where we are, right? We are, and so in a liberal conception of politics, the polis, the society, is an aggregate. It's a collection. It's like a jar of M&Ms with different colored things in it, and your job is how you organize this is to make sure that everyone's rights are respected. So the liberal view is that individuals are equal. Yes, they have rights, and we get together as a political community to secure our needs while protecting our rights. And we enter what people know. Again, everyone knows this, social contract sort of things. We make a deal, right? There's some implicit agreement that, I'll pay taxes if you take out my trash. The only reason we're together in a group is because we need stuff from each other. And political community is about figuring out the best way for us to get it.
Yeah, and I think too, so some of those rights that you describe we would recognize them as natural rights, and then some of those rights are defined, by the actual political regime. But I think liberal politics tries to be neutral with respect to the good, which I think is distinctive of liberal politics. It's not actually setting a good for the common consideration of the people or for their common striving. It's trying to be neutral with respect to the good, and that each is free to pursue the good as he or she conceives of it. And my rights end where your rights begin. Yeah. But within my particular zone of freedom, I can comport myself as I see fit.
Yeah.
And so even though, and this is like a little bit of criticism bringing in Alistair McIntyre's Whose Justice, Which Rationality, you can already begin to see that the tension there of trying to be neutral with respect to the good is significant and places great strain on the polity. Because whenever you're defining rights, those rights are with respect to duties of a certain sort, and those duties are with respect to certain claims on your personhood or on your family or whatever. So there's always a tension.
Yeah, and they can't be merely procedural. That's liberal politics says we're just going to be procedural about things. We'll have rules of recognition about how to do these, adjudicate claims, but we don't make claims. We just have rules about how to adjudicate between claims in a neutral sphere. And I think one is a claim, and two, it's very difficult because people do have different claims that they make and conceptions of the good life. I mean, liberal politics, of course, develops out of wars of religion and the more robust political view, you could say, that is, people are dying. So it's a response to a particular kind of historical narrative and a development of intellectual life in terms of equality and understanding of a leveling out of human beings, and they're moving away from a hierarchy. It's a long genealogy. So it's not like some evil genie just thought up liberal politics. It comes out of a particular, but these are, in a sense, its downsides are that it has this reductionist element to it, you could say. I think everyone feels that, right? Because Hobbes says, well, it's a war against all against all. And you do get a feel, especially today, if anyone thought liberal politics was anything but a war of all against all, it's quite clear that no, liberal politics today, again, small liberal, so modern political forms, is the most tribalistic, violent, at least in words, but oftentimes in deeds, interaction. I mean, this is... Sure, we're not in fascist communist regimes that are fighting out in other countries, but I think everyone feels today we are extremely divided, and we are a free, liberal, democratic nation.
Yeah, so maybe to kind of recover something of past riches, so as to reorient the conversation and maybe help us to think along more, classically political lines in our discussions that we host among friends and family, and maybe in our own contribution to the polity. We can talk then about Republican politics. And here you said, whereas with liberal politics, we see man as an individual with rights.
Yeah.
Here we see man more as a part of a whole. And now, mind you, again, for those downstream of the middle of the 20th century, we see in that the specter of a totalitarian regime. It's like, I don't want to be subordinated to some ersatz, whatever, moral organism, that you call the Reich or whatever.
Yeah, the state shows up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Then people start to get super nervous. But I think here it's helpful just to talk a little bit more about what it means to be a part of a whole, because here we're talking about a classical conception of the common good.
Yeah.
Right? Which common good isn't just the aggregate of all of our private and individual goods. It's like you said, it's a transcendent thing.
Mm-hmm.
So like the good of a family is its own interior order, right? And then its orientation to higher associations like the polity or like the church. But the good of the family isn't something that people really like cash out on, you know? So like,
it's not like here's my part of the good of the family and your part. We bring those together and like with our powers combined, if we can mix,
we summon Captain Planet.
Yeah, exactly. We summon the good of the family by our individual rings.
It's like by each individual's contribution to the good of the family, and that contribution isn't like doing chores necessarily. That contribution can be like having children. You know, by making a contribution to the good of the family, one builds out a common good, right, which transcends the individual or private good of each of its members. So it's the type of thing where, like, when you think about it in terms of divorce, all right, when two people get divorced, it's not like one of them takes half of their nuptial bliss and the other takes the other half. No one gets anything, okay, because the unit has been dissolved, and as a result of which, its common good has like evaporated.
Yeah,
right.
And the individuals inside the unit are defined in a sense by so you raise the spectrum, like I don't want to be defined in terms of some large unity, but if you think of the family, that's how, I mean, dad and mom, that's father and mother, those are roles, relationships, but it's not like just a hat they wear, nor would it be right to say, or like children, our identity is enmeshed in this as being parts of a particular whole. And I never experienced this, but like there are some families who just go by first names or something. It feels weird. Like it feels like, that's not right. There's something because then you're treating that, well, you're in a sense not admitting the unity of a family as a separate thing. You've reduced it to these individuals. So it just happens to be that we're a collection of 3 to 4 people, and some of us are younger than other ones, and others have been inside other ones, for 9 months or whatever. But that's not important. Like those don't set up any relationships, and that we're just 4 people, say 2 parents and 2 children, in a particular geographical space. I can map you, and there's no difference in that than 4 random people somewhere else kind of get, and they just, everything is up for, there's no past history or in a sense orientation to who you are as an individual. Whereas everyone, I hope, knows that if you're a human being, you're a son or a daughter or a mother or a father or an aunt or a cousin, these relationships, and they're constituent of you. They're not just kind of things you take on like a job where I used to work as a contractor and now I work as a plumber. I can't get rid of the fact that, for instance, I am an uncle. And that means something about who I am in this sort of greater whole of the family.
Yeah, within this paradigm, you are born into relationships. So on the other paradigm, basically all of your relationships are elective, right? You choose them and you arrange them contractually, and you are only bound insofar as you choose to be bound. Whereas in this paradigm, you are born bound, right? So you are born the son of parents. You are born, a speaker of this language. You are, like born by water into this particular faith community. And those things are decisive for who you are as an individual, but you haven't chosen any of them. And as a result of which, certain rights and duties arise by virtue of the interrelations. And so like when we talk about the common good, we're just talking about the order that obtains among the persons who pertain to a particular unit of life. So it could be the family, it could be the polity. The polity in this particular episode is the focus, could be the church. But what we are kind of meditating on in the discipline of politics is how better to orchestrate the unity among these different relationships, among these different persons, and to ameliorate the relationships among them so that each and all corporately together can contribute to the unity of the whole, the tranquility of order, the kind of flourishing of the citizenry, and also its orientation beyond that to higher good still.
And you can do a modern family, or you just get a liberal family in the small L sense. And what's that look like? It's when like individual family members meet against each other and they set up contracts, like they set up agreements and this sort of thing. And that happens during like family counseling sessions. And you can imagine a like liberal modern family account of the family's good, but everyone would agree that something was wrong about that. There'd been a breakdown between the family, and you'd want to move away from that and heal it. And yet, interestingly enough, you read modern politics as in a sense like family polity therapy. That for a while we were fighting with each other, and so instead of like fixing things, we went to this weird like, no, we just can't be together. Let's go to contracts and we'll talk to a counselor as a large image.
Yeah. That's really fascinating. I think there that like because of the cynicism that we described at the beginning, a lot of people are kind of content to throw up their hands and say, I mean, what else are we capable of?
Yeah.
So maybe we have like a few more minutes at the end of the episode. How does one then, in this kind of present evil age, in the current political dispensation, how does one exercise his or her political virtues in a way that actually contributes to the common good and which actually seeks to better the relationships that obtain among members of a family, members of a polity, members of a church, and to make a genuine contribution in light of these common goods around which we like congregate. So what is to be done? Because casting a vote is not enough, right? Or just kind of going in for political therapy sessions, as it were, also seems inadequate. So like, what are practical steps?
Yeah, there's none. It's hopeless. So what I've been thinking about, reflecting on is and this seems like a small thing, but to remind myself that I'm a citizen. Like it's really important that I'm an American citizen. And then the minute you say that, all of a sudden we get fractures again. We say, oh, well, who gets to be a citizen and who's let in, and so what does it mean? But we need to start talking. But just like, for instance, if a father goes from like a father to Todd, and someone eventually says, no, what, actually, I'm not just Todd, I'm actually a father. Like, that means something. I think it's helpful for us to remind ourselves and each other and talk about being American citizens. Because even bring that up draws about a relationship and understanding. Now, there'll be many conflicts and discussions about what exactly that means. Just like in a family, there's sometimes questions like, we don't do that in this family. And you might say, well, maybe we should, or what, that kind of thing. But those are healthy discussions. And we don't have those kind of discussions. But it happens first, though, in realizing that we all live in that same space, not as a contractual space, but like as a committed space, as a part of my identity. So to talk about the fact of America, American exceptionalism, American citizenship, American, these sort of things. I think Hamilton, in some ways, was an attempt at this, of bringing up the issue of us being in a project together. The musical that, unfortunately, because of the late unpleasantness, just was not able to do what it could do. But that kind of, again, inspiring work to remind ourselves of our status as people in a country, in a republic together, and then to work out what that means, not what we want individually, but as what we are as a community.
I think too that to kind of get local is a good way to go about it. I think a lot of people are thinking this way when it comes to food, but not necessarily with respect to politics, because we can look at the highest tiers of government or even of ecclesial government, and we might read the news about what Pope Francis said, or read the news about whatever the President of the United States said, and feel like we can't really contribute at all to the decision-making processes which inform whatever pronouncement, and that may lead us to a kind of feeling of despair. But there are things that can be done from the bottom up, right? And by virtue of subsidiarity, that's in truth the best way by which to go about it, is to think local, because those are the things that you love most, and as a result of which, those are the things where you're going to be most inspired to make genuine and like concrete contributions. So I think like in terms of like the homeowners association, okay, this is something that's very simple, and it's not glorious work, because it will often have you fighting with people much older than you who have deeply ingrained notions as to what it means to be the president of the HOA. But like, you can make your neighborhood a better place, a less crazy place. You can save yourself money. You can increase your property value. You can open your pool when maybe folks are still kind of nervous about public health situations, and you're like, dude, we need the pool. So like you can do concrete things in an HOA. You can do concrete things on a school board, for instance, which actually have serious practical import for curriculum building and for the education of your children and grandchildren. These are ways in which we can contribute, and it may be frustrating, right? But in dealing with the frustration attendant upon that, we can kind of cultivate the virtues of healthy engagement. Be it
in the political realm. Again, the political realm is just national politics or what's on CNN, but actually no, it's the community you live in. Like we and the rules we live under that. So I agree. It's actually directing right to the political. You're having political action there in the way that actually matters and importantly. Yeah.
So I think maybe we'll just leave it with that as a kind of general commendation of engaging. Does everyone have to be engaged in these type of active pursuits? No, not really. I mean, you can be completely content to contribute in whatever ways the Lord has kind of made known in his providence. But don't let the fear of frustration, or don't let kind of the despair of feeling yourself, I don't know, like your advice left unsolicited or your contribution left untapped. Don't let that paralyze you from making a real contribution. So I think that's all we got. So thanks so much for listening to Godsplaining. If you have some friends who have been in a real political slump since the election, they've been licking their wounds, or they've been sad, or they've been thrown for a loop, maybe something like this could help them to kind of reorient their gaze on things that are practically realizable. So you can go ahead and share that with them. But please do continue liking and sharing on social media and sharing with your friends. We're greatly appreciative, and we will chat with you next time on Godsplaining.
Thanks for listening to Godsplaining, a work of the Dominican Friars of the Province of St. Joseph. Visit us at opeast.org.